Hi everybody, welcome to welcome to my tarot class number 2, which is covering the Major Arcana. So the Major Arcana are archetypes or characters, forces in your life, and sometimes they indicate like the players that are around you, friends, family, loved ones, influences, fears, all kinds of things. They're the more powerful cards of the deck. There's 22 of them. They start with 0, they go to number 21. And they kind of tell a story in order from 0 to 21. As we go through them today, you'll kind of see an arc of a storyline, or sort of like I mentioned, the hero's journey, where you have the hero at the beginning going through some struggles and then rising up again at the end to be sort of reborn and renewed. Major Arcana are archetypal characters, forces, influence. They're numbered from 0 to 21. I said that? Okay, good. Yeah. And also you can use them as a mini deck to do readings. You can just use the Major Arcana cards, plus I suggested adding the aces from each suit to do those kinds of readings. In a full deck reading, the Major Arcana, the more of them that appear usually mean a stronger reading or stronger energy regarding the message or situation. They tell a story or cycle if you look at them in order. So like if you did a reading of 10 cards and 4 or 5 were Major Arcana, that's a lot. You know, probability out of 10 cards is maybe 2 or 3. So if you end up with a heavy reading on the majors, they kind of are saying, pay attention, listen, there's a lot going on, or there's some powerful stuff happening in your life. Okay, so we start with the Fool. What I have on the screen here are 10 decks, and they vary in style. Remember last week I talked about a classic deck where it sort of follows the Rider-Waite imagery, the classic idea, just redrawn in different ways, and then some concepts will draw them in completely different ways. So the first deck, you don't have to remember this, but the first deck is called the Aquarian Tarot. Second, I'm going across the top. The second one is called the Cosmic. The third one is the Fenestra. Fourth one is the Legacy of the Divine Tarot. And that's where you start going from like 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional art. You can see also the difference in sort of like a more digital art versus hand-drawn. And the last one on the end on that side is the Witch's Tarot. Not to be confused with Tarot of the Witches. There's both. And there's a new Witch's Tarot out even as well that I noticed. So this is an older version called the Witch's Tarot that is out of print now, I believe. Down on the bottom, these are sort of stylistic decks. The one on the bottom here is the Art Nouveau. You can see it has sort of that stained glass Art Deco Nouveau style. The second one is a Goddess Tarot deck, where all the cards are going to be goddesses that represent the characters. The middle one is a manga tarot, so it's more like an anime, Japanese, cartoon, graphic novel style. Steampunk tarot is that really dark card, again back to kind of a digital art. And the final one is the Crowley deck, the Thoth tarot. For the Fool, you can see similarities, and that's what I want us to look at and why I did this on the screen, so that you can see what are common elements to most of the cards. The Fool is usually a character, young man or unisex person, you can't always tell. Journeying, they either have a backpack or a pole with their things, their belongings on their back. Sometimes a cap, like a harlequin, jester outfit even. Journeying along, oftentimes they'll be accompanied by a pet, a dog, nipping at their heels, about to walk, jump, leap off a precipice or cliff. So you can see there's that common element in all of these, one way or another, and yet they are drawn in different ways. Artists' style can vary not just the art style, what they choose to put on the card. Not all of them picture the dog, not all of them picture a cliff, and so forth. Down with the Art Deco one, this has a snake at his heels, so still an animal. The goddess deck has a crane, looks like a pup or a wolf, dog, and so forth around the cards. What else can I show you? A couple have the classic jester or harlequin in common. Some do, some don't. The idea of the Fool is the concept of adventure. I tried to write like a one-word meaning for each card before going into the details so that you can kind of anchor it with something. But he's setting off on adventures. He's beginning his quest without really any expectations, so an open mind, beginner, has all of his belongings on his back, so he's ready to travel. Space waiting to be filled or a journey, new beginnings. He tends to be light on his feet, lighthearted, about to leap off the cliff, so there's a lightness of being to him. He's not a heavyweight kind of character. He's got a buoyancy and a free-spirited sense, but some people could say foolish or foolhardy as well. Childlike, innocent, blank slate often. Optimism, going forward blindly, could even be madness or impulsivity, whim, without hesitation, abandon, folly, or carefree. And here below each one I write some of the elements that are common to the card so that you have those. And then there's a little space you can write if you want to take any kind of notes. There's space between each description here. The next one, any questions? I can't stay long on each one to get through all 21 in our class tonight, but I want to kind of go through them, and then my thought is, we'll be revisiting these concepts in other discussions too. I don't expect you to just absorb it all as I blitz through, a couple minutes on each arcana. So the Fool starts out his journey. The Magician is next. So when we look at the Magician, we see the infinity sign on a lot of the cards. It's also called a lemniscate. Usually a table in front of him with the tools like the 4 suits, the sword, the cup, the wand, and the pentacle or coin, usually in front of him on a table. Sometimes he's holding a wand in his hand. The Crowley Thoth deck pictures him as Hermes, the magician here. The goddess deck here, she's Demeter, or I believe she's also called Ceres, with her scythe in her hand because that's her tool, the tool of the earth. The Magician is about ability and skill. It's about the ability to pull together all of the elements and the control of the elements in front of him. And so it's like possessing all of the components you need to go forward with whatever comes next. Whatever you're presented with, you have the tools to handle. Will, choice, controlling the elements, directing your path, taking the initiative, ambition, and alchemy. Certainly just basic alchemy is pictured most often by the Magician card or the Magus. Something else also from the alchemical tradition is if you see them pictured in a few of these, the Magician himself is pictured with one hand up and one hand down, and that's in a traditional pose of the Hermetic alchemist for the principle as above, so below. And that basically what that means is that everything outside of us is within us. Everything in the macrocosm is a microcosm also. Things that all happen outside in the world also are happening to you in your dynamic of just you and a few people and your friends. Things are repeated and echoed and paralleled. So as above, so below actually is a multidimensional statement. It's a little code in alchemy that really means a lot. And some people say on earth as it is in heaven. And that's another way of saying, I'm not an expert for sure in the Hermetic teachings, but the magician doing this, I know for sure, is what that gesture is supposed to mean, and they're saying basically that it's mostly about exerting their will. I would say also that man is the thing between heaven and earth, so we are the thing that bridges the gap between the heavenly and the earthly, is we're the thing that stands here as a channel. So I think the magician opens himself up to that and that awareness and says, okay, I'm able to connect from both directions if I choose.
It also kind of represents balance, right?
For sure, represents balance, yeah. And I think as much as we want to think we internally can control everything, I think it also is saying, I am a conduit, because the control
It's within.
is an illusion too.
It's kind of a yin-yang sort of perspective.
Exactly, like a yin-yang, for sure. Okay. The next one is the priestess. She's sort of the complement to the magician. Usually the magician is pictured as male and the priestess is pictured as female. She's often pictured between two towers, like the far right card where it's a black and a white tower. There's more directly the yin-yang of balance and femininity. She sometimes is on a throne with a crown or some semblance of royalty, or her third eye being open, so sometimes a jewel, tiara, headpiece, things like that. Vision, so her meaning is all about vision. Perception beyond the physical, self-knowledge, understanding, acceptance, divination, mystical wisdom, visionary, and mystery. So she's the feminine mysteries for sure. She also sometimes, the cards have the alpha and omega on them, which are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. The second card at the top there has it. I believe, not sure if any of the other ones of these have it. By the way, I didn't do this, but I do have the cards here if anyone wants to look closer through it. I don't know if it's distracting to do it while I go through them, but I do have them if anybody wants to look at them as we go. She's often also pictured with the moon or crescents, which are symbols of vision and sort of that otherworldly perception, that which is seen by night or through darkness or through veiled sight, is usually more associated with the moon than the sun. The feminine is usually associated with the moon, and the masculine is associated with the sun. And I wrote here that sometimes she's actually pictured with a beard on her chin, which is a tribute to a 9th century female pope who was disguised. Sometimes she's called the papess, which is like the female word for pope. So that's where that comes from.
Would that be towards the female pope? She's a nun.
You see.
It's a first nun.
Right, because here she's got like shrouded, cloaked. A head covering too. Sometimes priestesses often have their heads covered to be a purer channel, or less distracted by earthly concerns. And so headpieces, headdresses, tiaras. A couple of the women here have Isis, the symbol of Isis, on them as well. In fact, the goddess tarot does use Isis herself for that card. Okay, the Empress is next. The Empress is usually a queen on a throne, sometimes with jewels, riches. Sometimes she's pregnant, giving birth, or in a garden of fertility. So flowers, abundance, bright colors. There's a couple cards here that have a bird or a swan on them as well as common elements. So she represents growth, patience, nourishment, nurturing, the creative force, birthing or mothering, supporting others to grow, vitality, fertility, a ripeness or right timing, patience, and possibility. Also, sometimes the female symbol or the symbol of Venus is part of the card as well. So that's there as sort of she's the ultimate feminine. Sometimes when she comes up, think of her as queenly, like accept your own sovereignty or accept your own place to be pampered, or that you deserve someone's devotion, that you deserve adoration, to put yourself in a position of enjoying adulation, because a lot of women don't see themselves that way or deserving that. So a lot of times when this comes up, especially when I'm doing readings for, when I've done readings for younger girls, young ladies, young adults, you know, they're in their 20s basically, I'll see it as a card that kind of says, grow into that which deserves to be treated well and lavished. Next is the Emperor. The Emperor is the complement to the Empress, so he's a king on a throne, also crowned, often with a scepter. The goddess deck here has it pictured as Athena, the warrior goddess. And the Emperor is an authority and guardianship. So he's in the position to rule his lands, but also to protect them. He's in charge of his armies, he's in charge of his knights, he's in charge of all these people who serve him, and that idea of right power, responsibility, rules and discipline, the rational mind, your convictions, stability, tradition. So the Emperor is usually sort of about a little bit of an old-fashioned sense of things, or about a rigidity of like things have to be a certain way. Sometimes practical natures, practicalities, and sometimes Emperor or Empress can both be about money, simply having the means to do what you want to do. You can't rule a kingdom until you have a kingdom to rule. And you need all of the elements that put you in a position of authority or leadership in your own life. Also, sometimes, usually he's kind of got a stern expression, severe, and judging a little. He can have weapons or shields, swords, things like that. And sometimes a ram or a bull with horns is on the card as well. So there's a few here. The fourth one on the top has a stained glass ram at the top. It's hard to see, but it's up there. A couple of them have, the second one has like ram's heads in the back on the top of the pillars. So I'm not sure if it's meant to be Aries sign, specifically Taurus, or just certain symbols of animal meanings, which I didn't get into for us this time. Animals are in the tarot, and they have a whole probably interpretation of them, but right now I'm just looking at what's kind of the common elements that are found on the cards. It can help you remember, like if you think bullheaded or stubborn or rigid or strong, fierce, you've got the horns, you've got the weapons, sort of thinking about authority. Usually the pictures help you figure out hopefully what the cards are supposed to mean.
It's interesting though.
The next one is the Hierophant, also called the Pope or the High Priest. I like thinking of him as the complement to the High Priestess. The idea of the Pope was someone who was a spiritual leader. The shaman also was a spiritual leader. And so he represents guidance, usually in terms of spiritual guidance, or being the voice of, the channel of spirit for people. Discipline, being in a position above others, kind of a hierarchical role. Usually he's in a leadership position above other people. Anybody who's in a higher position in the church or in a religion or in a spiritual doctrine, there's always going to be people in that leadership position where they are the ones who are the voice to others. And they have acolytes, disciples, followers on the card below them in several of the cards. Pictured also are the keys, skeleton keys, crossed keys, things like that, representing the keys to knowledge, the keys to the gates of heaven, whatever you believe, if you believe it's religion or if you just believe it's sort of the idea of esoteric knowledge that he holds the keys to. Usually he has robes and sometimes a full pope headpiece and everything, and the papal staff, which is what the very first card has with the cross pieces. The next one is the lovers. So far we've gone, they're all kind of characters. The Fool, the Magician, the Empress, Emperor, they're all people, characters. They represent qualities of those characters, but they're all kind of characters in a story so far. Yeah. Question?
No, I'm just waiting to see the
Okay.
two girls on the. Oh. It's not two girls.
So the Lovers card is next. The Lovers card can be pictured as 2 or 3 people. Sometimes the theory is that if it's 2 people, there are a couple embracing, kissing. If it's 3, sometimes it's the 2 people standing before a third person being married or in some kind of ceremony, rather than rivalry. Usually a garden, flowers, some kind of ribbons, some sort of celebration, sometimes angels, angelic presence. One of the cards here has more of an Eden apple kind of image, the 4th one. Connection, union, harmony, sharing, empathy, attraction, affection, loyalty, sensitivity, love, partnership, synergy, alliances. So the lovers can come up not just about love and lover partnership, but any kind of partnership. Kinship, alliances, people whose team you should be on, people whose alignments go along with yours. And usually it's something significant where it's not just for that moment, it's something that will linger. The goddess deck has it pictured as Aphrodite, the goddess of love.
Really hoping they were going to have 2 girls.
2 girls.
Since it's a goddess deck.
Some decks do have that, 2 girls, genderless.
The lovers.
Yes, exactly.
Down there, you just don't know it.
She's with the dolphins.
Right.
They're.
Maybe they're actresses.
The next one is the chariot. The chariot is usually a horse carriage pulled by horses or sphinx creatures or characters. Oftentimes they are colored both light and dark, black and white specifically. Again, it's a yin-yang balance. But notice on the cards, often the faces of the animals are not facing the same way. They're kind of wild. They're untamed. They're going in opposite directions. The charioteer doesn't necessarily have a good hold on where he's going. So it's about travel and movement and momentum, but sometimes about the chase getting away from you. Harness your forces. Are you directing the chariot or is it pulling you? It's about victory, but at what cost? If you think about the harness racing of the Romans, they would do chariot races. They used the chariots in war. Usually it meant who had the better forces had the better chariots. You were up off the ground so you could defeat your enemies. But it often at terrible cost to the animals and the people who were fighting. It's brutal. I mean, any kind of war is, but recklessness, getting carried away, hold your horses, things like that. Phrases come to mind. I think a couple of them have horses, a couple have sphinx characters, notice. And there's even garlands like flowers for victory on the lower left card. The goddess card, I think I think she might be Aurora, like she's the chariot of the rainbow or of the sky. I have to look up who they have all these goddesses as. But I love how they're not all male characters. Some are female. I like that getting switched around.
Right.
Some have the sun, some have the moon behind them. Things like that. So it's about travel, but also change. And trying to get everything moving in one direction. and how well are you doing at that? Like if it comes up, it's saying maybe take a look if you're spreading yourself too thin, if things are not all heading down the same path. Now, here's where there's a little bit of a trick. I don't know why, but there's an anomaly in tarot decks over 8 and 11. So number 8 and number 11 are justice and strength, but some are 8 and some are 11. So I put them all together. They're all justice up there, but notice some of them are 11 and some of them are 8s. I don't know why those two flip, but they do.
Mine's flipped in my deck.
So I like strength being 11 because I was born on 11/11, and I love the card with the lion and the woman, and I like it feeling like that's me. So I choose to go with the strength card being my 11 and the justice card being my 8. And I can't even say more often one or the other because it's about half and half depending on the deck you're looking at, which way they've created it to be. So justice usually has scales, sometimes blindfolded, statue of justice, but basically usually scales, sometimes weighing a feather or weighing a heart. The goddess card has Mot. She's an Egyptian goddess. She looks a lot like Isis, but she's Mot. And she weighs people's souls when they die against a feather on the scales.
Right.
And if their heart is lighter than the feather, they get to ascend to the next place. The justice, the top row, the second one has sun and moon, the yin yang, has the elements in the scales, the different triangles. So it's definitely pulling on that idea of balance and evenness of all things.
What? Your two girls on the.
There's your two girls.
Yeah.
Balance and equality, karma, being objective, seeing others' viewpoints, taking a stance, fairness, a higher order, dharma, retribution, evening the score. Sometimes there's also a sword to indicate vengeance. So remember, justice sometimes in like the Greek stories, justice also was getting retribution or getting even. And sometimes the sword of vengeance or the avenging angels are forces in our lives. So the next one's the Hermit, 9, also called the Seeker. So notice the far right card at the top's the Seeker. I like that version. I like that it's called that. So it isn't this idea so negative of the Hermit being someone who goes and hides. But he's quite powerful. It's really the quest for knowledge. Usually the Hermit's pictured with a torch, a light, a lantern of some kind, going off into the darkness, bringing the light with him. So he is the source of the light himself. So enlightenment and always seeking higher wisdom. Inner truth, patience, seeking out new paths, bringing the light to the darkness. Less concerned with the opinion of others, usually like when people reach a crone age or older life, they care lots what people think of them. Doing research, trailblazing new paths, being a lone wolf, isolation, or pilgrimage, so taking a journey. Classic example of the Hermit would be Moses with the burning bush. He climbs up a mountain away from his people, all alone, to be closer to God, to seek the word, to be enlightened in some way. And what does he get? But he gets this message in the flame, in the burning bush. So it's literally this light, this torch that emblazons him with his vision. And then he, with his tablets, of course, comes down the mountain and brings that to the people. So the Hermit often goes somewhere on a journey on his own, and then is often a messenger to then bring that back if he so chooses. Not everyone does. People on paths of enlightenment often are just self-seeking. But scientists, they're seeking cures and they delve deep into their research because they're trying to find some answers to the hidden world around us. Atoms and molecules and stuff. So the Hermit is not to be shunned away from. as much as to see the gifts, I think, that are there. Also, sometimes he's in a cave or barren surroundings, because I think it's a little bit about foregoing the earthly pleasures to be able to focus completely on like the ascetic nature of pursuit of knowledge. The goddess deck, I believe that's Hecate, the goddess of the crossroads there. And she's got a couple of hounds. The Thoth deck looks like it also has some hounds in the corner as well. So, next one. 10 is the Wheel of Fortune. So, often pictured with a wheel. Sometimes the zodiac or other elemental symbols go around the wheel itself. And often there are other creatures or characters climbing, hanging off, moving around the wheel. They're pictured a couple of different ways in the decks here. It's all about change, time passing, what you can and can't control, chance, fate, fortune, destiny, coming full circle, cycles that repeat, that all things evolve, favor, luck, influence, serendipity, circumstance, what goes around comes around. Sometimes you just have to wait till the wheel turns, till the next thing happens. The stages of life, the fates, sometimes other deities are pictured, sometimes the seasons, the zodiac planets, all about sort of the stages of life and the changing of time. Sometimes mother, maiden, mother, crone are pictured, or some kind of life cycle going around the wheel. And my favorite card, Strength, 11. So the Strength card is, best word I could use for it is resilience. It's not just about brute strength or weaponry or muscle, armor, but it's about the ability in us to bounce back, to draw upon all of our resources and still push forwards, especially in dire times. Usually pictured as a woman with a lion at her feet or before her or on the path with her, usually showing some form of taming or submission to her, either putting his paw in her hand, or she's sometimes she's actually opening the jaws of the lion. And then often the lion is either stepping on a snake or some other form of danger he's protecting her from. So the lion is often, to me, is sort of the wild submitting itself to the wild in us, the strength in us that we have, the ferocity that we can all be to protect our young, to protect our kin, to fight for things that are important to us. The Art Nouveau deck pictures Hercules, so some people want to take it there. Hercules defeated a lion in one of his 12 labors, so I'm not sure if that's what that's.
Looks like he's got a girl bent backwards over his knee.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's. Yeah,
It looks like a belly button.
it looks actually like a centaur or something that he's defeating.
Yeah.
So that one's
right,
not the
okay.
traditional strength card, nor is the one above it where it's an armored warrior. So I don't like that one as much.
And it's got hooves on the bottom, so yeah, it's a,
Right.
he's
The
riding
dragon
on
is like the
horseback.
Asian version of a lion, though. So you would say, something it's also representing the danger element. The Thoth deck calls this lust. Crowley's deck calls the strength card lust. So she's naked riding this enormous lion, her head thrown back, in huh?
It has 3 faces.
So it's in enraptured. It does. She's enraptured, and
And a scorpion's tail.
so it might be there is a
Manticore? Is that the word?
or
that it-
chimera.
Chimera.
There is an animal with like
Multiple
the
tails.
harpy's face and the lion's body and the
And the
scorpion's tail. So
tail.
maybe that is what that one
That's
is.
an interesting card. It's probably the first one I've liked out of that deck.
The other thing to notice, the infinity sign is sometimes here as well, which matches the magician's card. Notice there's a few where the infinity sign is above her head, showing that she also possesses that strength and power of the world around her and the elements and the infinite possibilities. Tenacity, perseverance, also humility, because the lion is submitting. It's not a prideful strength as much as it's the subtlety of just showing up and staying there, you know. Let's see, just making sure I've mentioned everything. I have. Okay. So I love that card. What I love about the top far right card is the ribbon is just real subtle to me. It's not a leash, it's not a chain. She's just, it's very playful too. And I like that.
Loving, yeah.
And I think it's a lioness, right? On that one, where a lot of the other ones are a male lion, that one's a female.
Yeah.
So I like that as well. Something, if you haven't noticed yet, about the manga deck, which is the Japanese one in the middle, what they decided to do is flip the genders purposely. So where you would expect a female, they make it male. And so their emperor and empress were switched, and their priest and priestess were switched as far as what number was what,
I've been liking
male
that,
and
so-
female. And so that's where that one has a male strength card, but deliberately so. I wanted to point that out in that deck, I noticed. 12 is the Hanged Man. So now we come to, I guess, the beginnings of trials and tribulations. So like the first set of cards were about strengths, forces, allies, things that, you know, you want to rally with you on your journey. And now we get to what happens along the way, I guess. The unexpected. So the Hanged Man is an upside down figure, usually with a leg bent, hanging by one foot or his leg. And it represents sort of taking a look from the other side of things, a reverse perspective, turn things around. Sacrifice or martyrdom also, because it represents in some cases, the killing of the Corn King.
Yeah.
That was part of the fertility rituals. People who follow Christianity, the Apostle Peter was crucified upside down because he said he didn't want to be crucified in the same manner as Christ. He wasn't worthy. So he asked to be crucified upside down. So I think the cards aren't necessarily all about that, but that's still a powerful part of many people's mythology. Whether it's yours, the people you're reading for, the person who made the deck, it's just something that represents martyrdom and sacrifice in storytelling over and over. And the Bible is more stories to me. Sometimes can mean a dead end or limited options, you know, thinking you have no other paths, and you kind of need to shake things up and see things from a different way. Often also reversals, like regret, seeing something for the greater good, letting something go. When this comes up, usually I feel like look for what I'm missing, you know, which is kind of hard to do, but it's saying there's something going on you're not seeing. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Speaking of reversals,
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing a reading for someone, is it considered reversed if it's face up for the person that you're reading, or if it's reversed for you?
You have to decide before you put your cards down.
Oh, okay. So you make that choice for the cards
So,
and tell them which one is which.
so when I do readings, typically when I do readings, I either have someone sit next to me so that we're looking at the cards the same way, because then that helps. If they're across from me, usually I do right side up for me to lay the cards out so that I look at the pictures right side up, because that's how I'm going to interpret them. But then as I do it, I turn them around to the other person so they can look at the pictures too, so that they're not just seeing a picture upside down. So I align things right side up for me typically, and then if the person needs a better vision of them, I flip them around. Also, we talked about not always using reversed cards where you shuffle them both ways, but you can. So
I just never knew, because literally doesn't ever say so in the books.
Yeah, I guess
Which way is
right.
reversed? Is
Right.
it reversed if it's reversed away from you, or if it's away from
I-
the person
I-
in front of you?
I see if you're the one doing the reading, I see you have to see it right side up for you.
Okay.
Is how I go with it.
All right.
Yeah, but that's a great question.
Thanks.
That's a great
It
question.
may have come up last week, but I didn't get a chance to sit.
Yeah. I like the fourth one on the top where he's hanging from the ribbons. It's sort of like the Fool in the beginning too. It's like the red jester suit kind of. He's hanging from ribbons. It's a playful picture. More so than some of the other ones. I like the waterfall. You can hardly see it. The Manja one.
I like that.
She's upside down in a waterfall, just standing on her hands. It's more about the choice of it instead of like someone
Right, she's
stringing
not
you
so
up by your leg.
helpless. Yeah.
It looks like she's choosing this, you know. So I like that as well. Yeah.